5 years. 1,826 days of watching my mother die. Except she wasn't dying. She was never dying. And by the time I found out the truth, I had already lost everything. My savings, my education, my 20s, my trust in the one person who was supposed to protect me. This story is worse than yesterday's. I warned you. And if you're new here, you should know. Chloe doesn't tell easy stories. Chloe tells the ones that change you. Let me tell you about Jessica. Jessica was 22 years old in her final year of college, studying to become a veterinarian. She was the kind of daughter every parent dreams of. Hardworking, kind, the first person to call on Mother's Day and the last to leave at Christmas. Her mother, Margaret, was a retired school teacher. 61 years old, warm smile, soft voice, the kind of woman who brought homemade pie to every neighborhood gathering. She raised 2 children, Jessica and her younger brother David. Mostly on her own after her husband Tom left when the kids were small. Margaret was the center of everything, the glue, the one who held it all together. When Jessica had her heart broken in high school, Margaret stayed up all night making hot chocolate and talking about resilience. When David failed his driving test 3 times, Margaret drove him to every practice session without a single complaint. She was, by every measure anyone could see, a good mother, a devoted mother, a mother who would do anything for her children. And that last part, the anything part, turned out to be the problem. Because in November of 2018, Margaret sat her children down at the kitchen table and told them the words that no child is ever ready to hear. She had cancer, stage 3, pancreatic. The doctor gave her 2 years, maybe 3, with treatment. And in that moment, Jessica's world stopped spinning, and a different world, a world of hospitals and fear and sacrifice, began. Let me tell you about Jessica. Jessica was 22 years old in her final year of college, studying to become a veterinarian. She was the kind of daughter every parent dreams of. Hardworking, kind, the first person to call on Mother's Day and the last to leave at Christmas. Her mother, Margaret, was a retired school teacher. 61 years old, warm smile, soft voice, the kind of woman who brought homemade pie to every neighborhood gathering. She raised 2 children, Jessica and her younger brother David. Mostly on her own after her husband Tom left when the kids were small. Margaret was the center of everything, the glue, the one who held it all together. When Jessica had her heart broken in high school, Margaret stayed up all night making hot chocolate and talking about resilience. When David failed his driving test 3 times, Margaret drove him to every practice session without a single complaint. She was, by every measure anyone could see, a good mother, a devoted mother, a mother who would do anything for her children. And that last part, the anything part, turned out to be the problem. Because in November of 2018, Margaret sat her children down at the kitchen table and told them the words that no child is ever ready to hear. She had cancer, stage 3, pancreatic. The doctor gave her 2 years, maybe 3, with treatment. And in that moment, Jessica's world stopped spinning, and a different world, a world of hospitals and fear and sacrifice, began. Jessica did what any loving daughter would do. She dropped everything. She deferred her final year of veterinary school. She moved back home. She became her mother's full-time caretaker, driving her to chemotherapy appointments 3 times a week, managing her medications, cooking special meals that Margaret said the doctor recommended. She sold her car to help pay for treatment. She emptied her savings account, $12,000 she'd been putting aside since she was 16. She started a GoFundMe that raised another $43,000 from friends, family, and strangers who believed in Margaret's fight. David, her brother, sent money every month from his job in another state. Their father, Tom, who had barely spoken to Margaret in 15 years, sent a check for $5,000 with a note that said, "Whatever happened between us, I wouldn't wish this on anyone." The whole family, fractured as it was, came together around Margaret's illness. Cancer did what years of silence couldn't. It reunited them. Or at least it seemed to. But here's the thing about Jessica that you need to understand. Jessica was smart, veterinary school smart, detail-oriented, observant, kind of person who notices when something doesn't add up. And after 3 years of living with her mother's cancer, things were starting to not add up. The first thing Jessica noticed was the hair. Margaret had lost her hair during chemotherapy, or so she said, but one morning, Jessica found a receipt in the bathroom trash. It was for a razor, an electric razor, purchased 2 days before Margaret's last chemo session. Then there were the medications. Margaret took 14 pills a day, or so she told Jessica. But when Jessica counted the pills 1 week, the numbers didn't match. There were too many left, as if Margaret had been pretending to take them. And then came the envelope. It was a Tuesday. Margaret was at what she called a follow-up appointment. Jessica was cleaning the house when she found an envelope tucked behind the dresser in her mother's bedroom. Inside were medical records, real ones, from the hospital, with Margaret's name, social security number, and date of birth. Jessica read them. Every page, every report, every blood test, every scan, every biopsy result. They were all negative, every single one, for 5 years. Margaret did not have cancer. Margaret had never had cancer. There was no stage 3. There was no pancreatic tumor. There was no 2-year prognosis. There was nothing. Nothing except a mother who had looked her daughter in the eyes every single day for 5 years and lied. Jessica sat on her mother's bedroom floor for 45 minutes. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't call anyone. She just sat there, holding the medical records, staring at the wall, trying to understand something that cannot be understood. Her brain kept doing the math. 5 years, $12,000 of her own savings, $43,000 from the GoFundMe. David's monthly payments, probably another $30,000 over 5 years. Her father's $5,000. The cost of the medications Margaret never actually needed, the cost of the special diet, the cost of the hospital parking. But the money wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the math she couldn't put into numbers. 3 years of veterinary school, gone. A career that never started, a boyfriend who left because she was never available. Friends who drifted away because she canceled every plan. Her entire 20s spent inside a house, caring for a woman who didn't need care. Jessica was 27 years old. She had no degree, no savings, no career, no relationship, and no social life. She had given everything to her mother's cancer. And her mother's cancer did not exist. When Margaret came home that evening, Jessica was sitting at the kitchen table. The medical records were spread out in front of her, every page in order, 5 years of lies, laid out like evidence at a trial. Margaret walked in. She saw the papers. And she did something that Jessica would never forget. She smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not an embarrassed smile. A tired smile. The smile of someone who had been waiting to be caught. Jessica said one word. "Why?" Margaret sat down across from her daughter. She folded her hands and she answered with the most devastating sentence Jessica had ever heard. Because it was the only way to make you stay. Margaret explained, if you can call it an explanation. She said that after Jessica left for college, the house was empty. David was gone. Tom was gone. She was alone, completely alone. For the first time in 30 years, nobody needed her. And she couldn't bear it. So she invented a reason for them to come back. She created a crisis that would bring her children home. She faked a terminal illness because she was terrified of being forgotten. And it worked. For 5 years, it worked perfectly. Jessica called David that night. She told him everything. There was silence on the other end of the line for almost a full minute. Then David said 3 words, "I'm coming home." He drove 7 hours through the night. He arrived at 6 in the morning. And for the next 3 days, Jessica and David sat in that house with their mother and tried to understand what had happened to their family. Margaret cried. She apologized. She said she knew it was wrong. She said she had wanted to tell the truth so many times, but was afraid of losing them. She said she would do anything to make it right. But here is the thing about 5 years of lies. You cannot undo them with 3 days of apologies. You cannot give back a daughter's 20s. You cannot undrop out of veterinary school. You cannot unsell a car. You cannot unbreak the trust of the 2 people who loved you most in this world. Jessica looked at her mother, this woman who had held her hand through every nightmare, who had taught her to ride a bike, who had stayed up all night making hot chocolate, and she realized something terrible. She did not recognize her, not because Margaret had changed, but because the woman Jessica thought she knew had never existed. David called their father. Tom listened. And for the first time in 15 years, Tom cried. On the 4th morning, Jessica packed a single bag. She walked downstairs. Margaret was sitting at the kitchen table, the same table where she had first told her children about the cancer. The same table where the truth had finally come out. Margaret looked up. Her eyes were red. She said, "Please don't go." Jessica stood in the doorway. She looked at her mother for a long time. And then she said something that Margaret would hear in her head every night for the rest of her life. "I held your hand through chemotherapy that didn't exist. I wiped your tears after doctor visits that were fake. I gave up my career, my savings, my relationships, and 5 years of my life for a disease you invented. You didn't just lie to me, Mom. You stole me. You stole my life, and you called it love." Jessica walked out. She did not hug her mother. She did not say goodbye. She closed the door behind her and heard the sound of her mother crying on the other side. And for the first time in 5 years, she did not go back. What happened after Jessica left could fill a book, but here is what you need to know. The GoFundMe was shut down. $43,000. Jessica and David reported the fraud. Some donors demanded refunds. Others sent messages that ranged from heartbroken to furious. The local news picked up the story. Margaret's face was on the evening news for 3 nights straight. Margaret was charged with fraud. She pleaded no contest and received 2 years of probation, mandatory therapy, and a restitution order. She was required to pay back every dollar. She couldn't. She had spent most of it. Her neighbors stopped talking to her. Her church asked her not to come back. The school where she had taught for 20 years removed her photo from the alumni wall. David never spoke to her again. He changed his phone number and moved to a different state. Tom, their father, said he felt guilty for sending money, but mostly he felt sad. Sad that the woman he once loved was capable of something like this. And Jessica rebuilt. It took time. It took therapy. It took admitting that she had been a victim, even though every instinct told her she should have known. She re-enrolled in veterinary school at 28. She graduated at 31. She opened a small animal clinic in a town where nobody knew her story. She adopted 2 dogs and named them something she refused to tell the internet. She was okay, not perfect, but okay. And sometimes, okay is enough. People ask me, how do you forgive someone who stole 5 years of your life? And I think the answer is, maybe you don't. Maybe forgiveness isn't the point. Maybe the point is understanding that some people are so afraid of being alone that they will burn down everyone around them just to feel warm. Margaret didn't fake cancer because she was evil. She faked it because she was empty, and emptiness, when it gets desperate enough, will do things that evil wouldn't dare. But here is the lesson Chloe takes from Jessica's story. The cruelest lies are not the ones told by strangers. They are the ones told by the people who raised you, because when a stranger lies, you lose trust in one person. When your mother lies, you lose trust in the idea of trust itself. But this story, as devastating as it is not even the cruelest thing Chloe has told this week. Tomorrow, I have a story about friendship, about a group of 5 best friends, and a group chat that was never meant to be found. A chat where they said things about the 6th friend, the one not in the group, that will make your blood run cold. Subscribe, because you're going to want to hear what they said. And one last thing. Could you ever forgive Margaret? Knowing why she did it, the loneliness, the fear, does that change anything? Or are 5 stolen years unforgivable, no matter the reason? Tell me in the comments, because this one, even Chloe can't decide.